Let's deconstruct the sons of God and find out who is the Bible referring to when it says B'nai Elohim. That's the word that's in question today. What does it mean and how should we translate it? B'nai means son. Elohim is a name for God, first used in Genesis, but a direct translation is powerful ones. So a literal translation of B'nai Elohim is sons of God or sons of the powerful ones. So this is what most people say. The sons of God or B'nai Elohim are actually angels. Why do they say that? Well, I believe that's because of the book of Enoch, which is not biblical canon, and because of the Greek translation of the Bible, which is the Septuagint, which translates the word B'nai Elohim as sons of God in Genesis 6, but in the book of Job, it translates it as angels. So for some reason, the Septuagint is translating the word differently in the two different books. You may be asking, is there a dedicated Hebrew word for angels? Well, actually, yes, there is, and it's malach, which is an angel or a messenger. The Jewish view of the book of Enoch. Let's talk about the Midrash. The Midrash is a compiled rabbinic interpretation of scriptures written around 300 AD and then fully compiled hundreds of years later. The Midrash Bereshit Rabbati, Midrash of Shem Hazai and Hazael repeats the book of Enoch's interpretation of fallen angels, which was written around 400 to 600 years earlier. So what's interesting is, though the Jewish consider the book heretical, that Midrash section is endorsing some of its interpretations of sons of God being angels. Today, Christians don't fully credit the book of Enoch as heretical, although there's heretical sections that are blatantly untrue. Because the book prophesies the coming Messiah, the early Christians did read and quote from it. Comparing the syntax, I've noticed that when the book of Enoch says sons of man, it appears that Jesus is directly quoting from it when he refers to himself. But note, that term isn't unique to the book of Enoch. Ezekiel frequently uses it also. Due to these facts, it's safe to say the book of Enoch is definitely a mixed bag. It has some truths, some ridiculous fictions, and just blatantly falsehoods. So moving forward, let's call the sons of God, being angels, as the meta view. The second view is that the sons of God are actually the righteous line of Seth, Adam's son, and they intermarried with the daughters of men, being the wicked line of Cain. We'll call this the sonship view. There's a third view, and it's that the sons of God are the powerful, righteous people in authority. This view is based on B'nai Elohim being literally translated as sons of the powerful ones. They're the righteous rulers or judges of the land. They see women of lesser status and procreate with them. Essentially, they abuse their power of authority, and as a result, they become corrupted and no longer righteous. Their offspring become new wicked rulers of the land. Because they're humans, and morally this interpretation is very similar to the line of Seth view, we'll put this in the sonship category. Okay, now let's read the scripture in question. Genesis 6:1. When humans began to increase in number on the earth and daughters were born to them, the sons of God saw that the daughters of men were beautiful, and they married any of them they chose. The Lord said, My spirit will not contend with humans forever, for they are mortal. Their days will be 120 years. The Nephilim, which means fallen ones, were on the earth in those days and also afterwards. When the sons of God went to the daughters of humans and had children by them, they were the heroes of old, men of renown. Okay, so the context. The Noah story is a story of God's divine judgment on the world by way of floodwaters. So setting up the narrative, the question is, how and why did the whole human race become wicked? The meta view of fallen angels doesn't explain anything in the Noah story. It actually distracts us and adds confusion, which leads us to more unrelated questions. The sonship view answers our questions on how the whole world became wicked, and it's actually very consistent, and it fits thematically with other biblical teachings. An example would be marrying others with the same spiritual faith, or the consequences of being, as the New Testament would say, unequally yoked. Okay, so Job chapter 1, verse 6. One day the sons of God came to present themselves before the Lord, and Satan, which is the accuser or adversary, also came with them. So the meta view will say these are angels presenting themselves before God in heaven, and the fallen angel, Satan, is with them. Okay, now let's go into the context of Job. The prior verse says Job would purify and sacrifice burnt offerings for his children. Now the question is, where does his offering go? Well, in Revelation 5:8, it says, And when he had taken it, the 4 living creatures and the 24 elders fell down before the Lamb. Each one had a harp, and they were holding golden bowls full of incense, which are the prayers of God's people. Based on that scripture, the prayers of the saints are like a pleasing scent of incense before God. So when we plug in the sonship view, we get an encouraging picture of righteous people praying and worshiping God. And when they do that, we're instantly in God's presence, and to God it's like a pleasing scent of incense. But there's an uninvited guest with us, the accuser, Satan. Okay, let's go to Job 38. This is another scripture that uses the term sons of God. Verse 4, God is speaking. Where were you when I laid the earth's foundations? Tell me if you understand. Who marked off its dimensions? Surely you know. Who stretched out a measuring line across it? On what were its footings set? Or who laid its cornerstone? when the morning stars sang together and all the sons of God shouted for joy. So we read this term, the morning star. Who is the morning star? The meta view will say the morning star is the sun and the sons of God are the angels shouting for joy in the beginning of creation in Genesis. But the Bible already tells us who the morning star is. Let's take a look at Revelation 22:16. Jesus declares, I am the root, the offspring of David, and the bright morning star. So now what's amazingly cool is this passage is describing the creation of the world with metaphors. And when we plug in the sonship view, we see Jesus and us crying out in celebration to God because of his amazing creation. Okay, let's do a thought experiment. Now, does it make sense that demons can procreate with humans? If that were the case, half of the Nephilim's DNA would be from demons. Assuming demon procreation continued over the years and given man sexual depravity for centuries, I'm sure the overwhelming majority of the population's DNA would be demon DNA. Now, I love sci-fi movies, and this would be a great start, but unfortunately, this viewpoint is not helping us understand the scriptures better or teaching us how to live our lives more in line with Christ. Okay, so our conclusion. So going back to our two views, the sonship view and the meta view, so what makes sense? To follow an interpretation that points towards a reoccurring established biblical principles or teachings? Or does it make sense to follow an interpretation that appears to come out of left field and ultimately doesn't make any sense with the rest of the Bible and has no practical use for our lives? I think we need to be careful. We need to concentrate on sound doctrine and not distractions. Sound doctrine produces fruits, that fruit being positive actions in our lives. Distraction spiritually leads us nowhere, and ultimately, we end up with more unanswered questions. With all that being said, pray about it and you decide.